They called her worthless. A rag to wipe floors. A shadow in her father's house. Too plain to marry. Too much trouble to keep. For 26 years, Cora Whitlock swallowed every insult, every sneer, every day spent scrubbing other people's filth, until the night they pushed too far. Until she looked across a crowded room and chose the one man everyone feared, a silent, scarred rancher with a reputation darker than the desert night. She didn't ask permission. She didn't beg. She just walked out into the dust and claimed the life they said she'd never deserve. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive in. The sound that woke Cora wasn't the rooster or the milk cart rattling down the street. It was her stepmother's voice, sharp as a whip crack, cutting through the thin walls of the room she'd been shoved into 3 years ago. "Cora, the chamber pots won't empty themselves." She opened her eyes to the same water-stained ceiling she'd memorized 1,000 times. 5:30 in the morning, same as always. Her back ached from the narrow cot, her hands were still raw from yesterday's lye soap, and somewhere in the house, her half-sister Margot was probably still asleep in a proper bed with actual pillows. Cora sat up, pulled on the same gray dress she wore most days, and braided her dark hair without bothering to look in the mirror. Mirrors didn't matter when you were invisible. By the time she made it downstairs, her stepmother Constance was already waiting, arms crossed, face pinched like she'd been sucking on a lemon since dawn. "You're late. It's 5:30. Don't talk back to me, girl. Your father may tolerate your sulking, but I won't have it in my house." My house. Always my house, even though Cora's mother had lived here first, had died here giving birth to a son who followed her 6 months later. Constance had moved in barely a year after the funeral, bringing Margot and a smile that disappeared the moment the minister pronounced them married. That was 15 years ago. Cora grabbed the bucket and headed upstairs without another word. There was no point arguing with Constance. There was no point arguing with anyone. She'd learned that lesson young, learned it hard, learned it in ways that left marks you couldn't see. The Whitlock house sat on the edge of Tempers Creek, a coal town in western Pennsylvania that had seen better days and worse winters. Her father ran the company store, which meant he owned half the debt in town and most of the people who owed it. Edmund Whitlock was a practical man. He counted coins, weighed flour to the ounce, and never gave credit to anyone who couldn't prove they'd pay it back. He'd never given Cora much either. Not attention, not affection, not even her mother's wedding ring, which now sat on Margot's finger like it had always belonged there. By noon, Cora had scrubbed 3 floors, beaten 4 rugs, peeled potatoes until her fingers cramped, and polished silver that hadn't been used since before her mother died. Constance followed her from room to room, pointing out missed spots, sighing dramatically, muttering about how difficult it was to find good help these days. Cora wasn't help. She was family, supposedly. But family didn't sleep in the maid's room. Family didn't eat after everyone else finished. Family didn't get handed their dead mother's dresses, taken in and sewn over until they fit, until every memory was stitched into something useful. "You'll need to go to the store," Constance said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with a list already written. "Your father's expecting a shipment this afternoon. He'll need help unpacking." Cora wiped her hands on her apron. "When should I—" "Now, girl. Honestly, do I have to explain everything?" The walk to the store took 20 minutes. The town was small, the streets dusty, the people predictable. Mrs. Callahan sweeping her steps, pretending not to notice Cora. The Brennan boys loitering outside the saloon, even though they weren't old enough to drink. Old Thomas sitting on his porch, whittling, watching, never saying much but seeing everything. The store smelled like coffee and sawdust and the faint metallic tang of the cash register. Her father stood behind the counter, glasses perched on his nose, ledger open, pen moving in precise lines. He didn't look up when she entered. "The shipment's in the back," he said. "Fabric mostly, some canned goods, sort it by type." "Yes, sir." She worked in silence, stacking bolts of cloth, organizing tins, wiping dust off jars of preserves that had probably been sitting there since last autumn. Her father appeared once, glanced at her work, grunted something that might have been approval, and disappeared back to his ledger. She was almost finished when the bell above the door chimed. Cora didn't need to look to know who it was. Margot had a particular way of entering a room like she was expecting applause. "Daddy!" "No." Margot's voice was sugar and smoke, practiced and perfect. Mrs. Henderson says the blue fabric came in. The one I wanted for my dress? In the back, Edmund said, and his voice was different now, softer, warmer. The voice he'd never used with Cora, not once, not ever. Margot swept past the counter, trailing perfume and entitlement. She was beautiful. Everyone said so. Blonde hair that curled just right, blue eyes that sparkled when she wanted something, a figure that turned heads even in a town as small as Tempers Creek. She stopped when she saw Cora. "Oh, you're here. I work here." "Do you?" Margot smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach anywhere important. "I thought you just lurked." Cora turned back to the shelf, kept stacking. "This was easier. This required nothing. Mother says you'll need to press my dress for the social tonight," Margot continued, running her fingers over a bolt of yellow cotton. "And fix my hair. You're good at that at least." The social, right. The monthly gathering at the church hall where everyone pretended to be more Christian than they were and gossiped about everyone who didn't show up. Cora had stopped going 2 years ago. Nobody noticed. "I'll press the dress," Cora said. "And my hair." "And your hair." Margot picked up the blue fabric, held it against herself, admired her reflection in the window. "Samuel Pritchard will be there. He's going to ask me to dance. Everyone knows it." Samuel Pritchard was the banker's son, soft-handed and softer-headed, but he had money and prospects and a house in town that didn't smell like coal dust. Margot had been circling him for months. "That's nice," Cora said, because it was easier than saying nothing. "Nice?" Margot laughed. "It's better than nice. It's everything." She turned, fabric clutched to her chest, eyes bright with something Cora didn't recognize anymore. "When I marry Samuel, I'll never have to lift a finger again. I'll have a real house, real dresses, a real life, not like—" She stopped, but the words hung there anyway. "Not like you." Edmund appeared then, reaching for the blue fabric. "This the one you want, sweetheart?" "Yes, Daddy. I'll put it on the house account." Cora kept stacking cans. The account that was really Edmund's money. The account Cora would never have access to. The account that tracked Margot's whims and Constance's demands and left Cora with nothing but the clothes on her back and the room she'd been shoved into. She finished the inventory, locked the back door, and walked home as the sun started sinking toward the hills. The air was cooler now, smelled like rain coming, like the summer was finally breaking into something else. By the time she got back, Constance had already laid out Margot's dress, pale pink, expensive, completely impractical. Cora pressed it without being asked, fixed the lace that had come loose at the collar, sewed a button that had been hanging by a thread. At 7, Margot came down in her pink dress and her mother's jewelry, smelling like rosewater and ambition. Constance fussed over her, adjusting her hair, straightening her neckline, declaring her absolutely perfect. Neither of them looked at Cora. They left in the carriage at 7:30, Edmund driving, Constance and Margot in the back, chattering about who would be there and what they'd say and how many heads Margot would turn. Cora stood in the doorway and watched them disappear down the road. Then she went inside, ate the cold potatoes left in the pan, and climbed the stairs to her room. She should have slept. She had 1,000 things to do tomorrow. Laundry, mending, scrubbing the front steps, possibly dealing with whatever disaster Margot caused at the social. But sleep didn't come. It hadn't been coming much lately. Instead, she sat on the edge of her cot and stared at the bag under her bed. She'd started packing it 6 months ago. Not because she had a plan, because she needed to believe that someday, somehow, she might leave. 2 dresses, a coat, a pair of boots that still had some life in them. Her mother's Bible, even though she hadn't opened it in years. A few coins she'd managed to squirrel away from the rare times Edmund paid her for work at the store. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The house was silent now. Too silent. The kind of silence that made you hear things, floorboards creaking, wind rattling windows, your own heartbeat in your ears. Cora lay back on the cot and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be the same as today, and the day after that, and the day after that, until she was 30, 40, 50, still scrubbing floors, still invisible, still waiting for a life that would never come. Unless she did something. The thought came like it always did, quiet, persistent, dangerous. She pushed it away like she always did, rolled over, tried to sleep. But it didn't leave. It never did. The social had been a disaster. Cora didn't know the details yet, but she could tell from the way the carriage rattled up to the house at 10:30, from the way Constance's voice carried through the walls, from the way Margot's door slammed hard enough to shake the frame. She stayed in her room, listening. Absolutely humiliated. Not my fault. The whole town saw. Cora waited until the voices stopped, until the house settled back into its regular silence. Then she crept downstairs, careful to avoid the squeaky step, and found Constance in the kitchen, still in her good dress, pouring herself a very full glass of sherry. What happened? Constance looked up, eyes red, mouth tight. None of your concern. Is Margot? I said it's none of your concern. She drank half the glass in one swallow. Samuel Pritchard proposed to Eleanor Watts tonight, in front of everyone. Margot made a scene. Cora didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Your sister, Constance continued, voice shaking now, threw her drink in his face and called Eleanor a conniving snake, at a church social, in front of the minister. Cora felt something that might have been sympathy if she had any left to give. We're ruined, Constance whispered. The whole town is talking. No decent man will look at her now. She stopped, pressed her hand to her mouth, looked at Cora like she was seeing her for the first time in years. At least you've never caused me this kind of embarrassment. Because Cora had never been important enough to cause embarrassment. Because she'd never been invited to matter. She went back upstairs, lay down, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Well, the next 3 weeks were worse than usual. Margot refused to leave her room except to eat, and even then she barely spoke. Constance moved through the house like a ghost, snapping at Cora for things that weren't her fault, crying in the parlor when she thought no one could hear. Edmund retreated to the store and stayed there, came home late, said even less than usual. And Cora worked. She always worked. By the time autumn arrived, the house had settled into a new kind of quiet. Not peace, but resignation. Margot started appearing at meals again, pale and subdued, her spark dimmed to something small and bitter. Constance stopped crying and started planning, talking about families in other towns, potential suitors who might not have heard about the incident. Cora scrubbed floors and stayed invisible. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by the postal carrier, who looked at Edmund with something that might have been pity. Edmund read it at the dinner table, face going pale, hands shaking just slightly. What is it? Constance demanded. An invitation. His voice was flat. From Lawrence Greer. The name hung in the air like smoke. Lawrence Greer was a cattle baron from Colorado, a man who'd made his fortune in beef and land and other people's misery. He'd left Temper's Creek 20 years ago with nothing and come back twice since, each time richer, each time more insufferable. He was 50 now, widowed, and apparently looking for a wife. He's invited us to dinner, Edmund continued, still staring at the letter. Friday night. He wants to meet Margot. Margot's head snapped up. What? He says he's looking to settle down. Wants a young wife from a good family. I won't. You will, Constance said, and her voice had steel in it now. This is the opportunity we need. Lawrence Greer has money, influence, land. He can give you everything. He's old, Margot whispered. He's wealthy. I don't love him. You'll learn. Cora watched from the corner where she stood with the serving dish, watched Margot's face crumple, watched Constance's jaw set, watched Edmund retreat behind his newspaper like the coward he was. What about me? Margot's voice was small now, desperate. Don't I get a choice? You made your choice, Constance said coldly, when you threw that drink. This is what's left. Margot looked at her father. Daddy? Edmund didn't lower the newspaper. She looked at Cora then, and for just a second something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Understanding, the knowledge that neither of them had ever really mattered, not in the ways that counted. Then Margot stood, left the table, and locked herself in her room for the rest of the night. Friday came too fast. The house was chaos all day. Constance ordering Cora around, demanding perfection, inspecting every corner, every surface, every detail. Margot's dress had to be perfect. The dinner had to be perfect. The house had to look like they were the kind of family that belonged in Lawrence Greer's world. Cora cooked, cleaned, polished, pressed. Her hands were raw by noon, her back screaming by 3, but she kept going because there was no alternative. At 6, Lawrence Greer arrived in a carriage that probably cost more than the house. Cora answered the door because Constance was still fixing Margot's hair, and Edmund was in his study, working up the nerve to be sociable. Lawrence Greer was exactly what she expected. Tall, broad, gray at the temples, expensive suit, cold eyes. He looked at her the way you'd look at furniture. "The help," he said. Not a question. "I'll get Mr. Whitlock." She stepped aside, let him enter, disappeared before he could say anything else. This was her role. This was what she was good at, being there when needed, gone when not. Dinner was agony. Cora served each course silently, refilled glasses, cleared plates. Lawrence talked about his ranch, his cattle, his plans to expand. Edmund nodded and agreed with everything. Constance smiled until her face must have hurt. Margot sat frozen, barely eating, barely speaking. "You're quiet," Lawrence said to her during the 4th course. "I like that in a woman." Margot's fork trembled against her plate. "She's just shy," Constance said quickly. "Aren't you, sweetheart?" Margot nodded. "Good." Lawrence leaned back, studied Margot like she was livestock. "I'll be frank, Edmund. I need a wife. Someone young, someone manageable. I'm prepared to be generous." "How generous?" Edmund's voice was careful. $5,000. "Plus an allowance for your wife and a line of credit at my bank." Constance inhaled sharply. "In exchange," Lawrence continued, "I take Margot back to Colorado as my wife. We marry within the month." Margot made a sound, small, broken, barely human. "She'd be well taken care of," Lawrence said. "I'm not a cruel man, just a practical one." Cora stood in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, hands gripping the empty serving tray so hard her knuckles went white. She wanted to speak, to scream, to do something, but she didn't, because she never did. "Could we have a moment to discuss?" Edmund asked. "Of course." They excused themselves, Edmund, Constance, and Lawrence, disappearing into the study like Margot's entire life wasn't being sold in the next room. Cora and Margot were alone. Margot stared at her plate, tears streaming silently down her face, ruining the makeup Constance had spent an hour applying. "I'm sorry," Cora said quietly. "Are you?" Margot's voice was hollow. "You've hated me for years." "I've never—" "Don't lie. I'm not stupid." Margot looked up, eyes red and empty. "You think I deserved this. Because of Samuel. Because I'm spoiled. Because I had everything you didn't." Cora set the tray down. "I don't think you deserve this." "But you don't think I deserve better either." The words hung there, true and terrible. Before Cora could answer, the study door opened. Edmund, Constance, and Lawrence emerged, faces set, decision made. "It's settled," Edmund said. "The wedding will be in 3 weeks." Margot stood slowly, mechanically. "May I be excused?" "Of course, sweetheart," Constance said, but her voice was distant now, already counting the money. Margot left without looking at anyone. Lawrence stayed for another hour, discussing details, signing papers, treating the whole thing like a business transaction, because that's what it was. When he finally left, Constance was radiant. Edmund was relieved, and Cora was dismissed to the kitchen to clean up. She scrubbed dishes until her hands bled, until the water ran cold, until the house went dark and silent around her. Then she climbed the stairs, walked past Margot's closed door, and sat on her cot in the darkness. She should have felt something, anger, sadness, horror, but she'd run out of those years ago. Now there was just numbness and the quiet certainty that this was how things worked. Men with money took what they wanted. Women like Margot and Cora were just currency. She pulled the bag out from under her bed, held it in her lap. Tomorrow would be the same as today, and the day after that, unless she did something. The thought wouldn't leave this time. It sat in her chest, heavy and insistent, and for the first time in 26 years, Cora Whitlock decided to listen. She waited until the house was asleep. 1 in the morning, maybe later, Constance snoring in the master bedroom. Edmund in his study, passed out in his chair with an empty bottle beside him. Margot's room dark and silent. Cora moved quietly, efficiently. She'd been planning this for 6 months, even if she hadn't admitted it to herself. She knew which floorboards creaked. She knew which doors squeaked. She knew how to be invisible, and tonight that would save her. She took the bag from under her bed, heavier now, filled with everything she owned. She took the coins from the jar she'd hidden behind the loose brick in her wall. She took her mother's Bible and the photograph of her parents on their wedding day, the only proof she'd ever been part of something. Then she walked downstairs, out the back door, and into the night. The air was cold, sharp, tasting like freedom and fear. She didn't look back. Looking back would make her think, and thinking would make her stop. She walked through town, past darkened houses, past the church with its judgmental steeple, past the store where she'd wasted years sorting fabric for people who never saw her. She walked until she reached the edge of town, where the road split. One direction back toward the life she'd known, the other toward something else entirely. There was a wagon there, waiting. She'd heard about it 2 weeks ago, overheard really, while serving dinner. A man looking for workers to head west. A man who didn't ask questions. The driver was asleep against a wheel, hat pulled low. Cora cleared her throat. He stirred, looked up. Yeah? You heading west? Might be. You still taking passengers? He studied her in the darkness. A young woman alone carrying a bag, looking like she was running from something. He'd seen this before. Cost you $10. She had 12. Deal. Climb in the back. We leave at dawn. She did, settling onto the hard wooden bench next to 3 other people who also looked like they were running. Nobody spoke. Nobody asked. As the sky started to lighten, the wagon lurched forward, wheels groaning, horses snorting. Cora watched Temper's Creek disappear behind her, the houses shrinking, the smoke from morning fires rising, the whole town becoming smaller and smaller until it was just a smudge on the horizon. She was 26 years old. She had $2 left, 2 dresses, and absolutely no plan. But she was free, and that, for now, was enough. The journey west was harder than anything Cora had imagined. 3 weeks in the wagon, bouncing over roads that barely deserved the name, sleeping rough, eating whatever they could find or afford. The other passengers came and went. A preacher who got off in Ohio, a family heading to Kansas, a gambler who disappeared one night with half their supplies. Cora kept to herself, spoke when spoken to, learned to sleep sitting up and eat food that tasted like dust. By the time they reached Colorado territory, she had 50 cents left in blisters on top of blisters. "This is my stop," the driver said, pulling into a town that looked like it had been thrown together and forgotten. "Good luck." Cora climbed down, bag in hand, and looked around. The town was called Salvation, ironic considering how God-forsaken it looked. One main street, buildings made of wood and hope, people who moved like they'd been working since birth and would keep working until death. A mining town, she realized. Silver, probably. The mountains in the distance had that stripped, scarred look. She walked down the street, looking for anything that might help. A job posting, a boarding house, a church that might take pity. She found none of those things. What she found was a saloon called the Broken Spoke and a sign in the window, "Cook Wanted." Cora hesitated. Saloons weren't respectable, but neither was starving. She pushed open the door. Inside, it smelled like whiskey and smoke and desperation. A few men sat at tables, nursing drinks, looking like they'd been there since yesterday. Behind the bar, a woman with gray hair and hard eyes looked up. "We're not open." "I saw the sign," Cora said, "about the cook." The woman studied her. "You know how to cook?" "Yes." "For 50 men at a time?" "I can learn." A long pause, then, "Name's Ruth. I own this place. You work 6 days a week, dawn to midnight. You get a room upstairs, 2 meals a day, and $3 a week. You steal from me, you're out. You cause trouble, you're out. Understood?" "Understood. Start tomorrow." Cora nodded, took the key Ruth handed her, and climbed the narrow stairs to a room barely bigger than the one she'd left behind. But it was hers. She'd earned it, and nobody could take it away. She set her bag on the floor, sat on the bed, and let herself breathe for the first time in weeks. Then she cried, hard, ugly, gasping sobs that she'd been holding in since the night Margot's life was sold and Cora realized hers never would be unless she took it. When she was done, she washed her face in the basin, changed into her other dress, and went downstairs to ask Ruth what she needed to know. Because tomorrow, Cora Whitlock would start a new life, and this time, she'd make it count. 6 months passed. Cora learned to cook for crowds, to handle drunks, to keep her head down and her mouth shut. She learned which miners paid their tabs and which ones needed reminding. She learned that Ruth was hard but fair, and that the other girls who worked at the Broken Spoke had their own stories, their own reasons for being there. She sent no letters back to Temper's Creek. As far as she knew, no one was looking. Life in Salvation was brutal, exhausting, and honest in a way her old life never had been. She worked, she slept, she saved every penny she could. By winter, she had $20 tucked away. By spring, almost $50. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday, late, the saloon packed with miners who'd just been paid. Cora was in the kitchen, elbow deep in dishwater, when Ruth appeared in the doorway. "Need you out front." I know, but Molly's sick, and we're 3 deep at the bar. Just serve drinks, nothing else." Cora dried her hands, took off her apron, and followed Ruth into the chaos. The saloon was loud, smoky, full of men who'd been underground all week and wanted to forget. Cora moved between tables, taking orders, delivering whiskey, dodging hands that reached for places they shouldn't. She was collecting empty glasses when she heard it. "Well, look what we have here." The voice was familiar. Horribly, impossibly familiar. Cora turned slowly. Lawrence Greer sat at a corner table, older than she remembered, harder, flanked by 2 men who looked like they'd kill for fun. "Cora Whitlock," he said, smiling. "Edmund's girl. What in hell are you doing in Colorado?" Her mouth went dry. "I'm working." "I can see that." His smile widened. "Does your father know you're here working in a saloon?" "I don't know. I don't care." "Spirited. I like that." He leaned back, studied her like she was something he might buy. "I married your sister, you know, 3 months after you disappeared. She's back at my ranch now. Pregnant, if you're curious." Cora felt something twist in her chest. "Good for her." "Is it?" Lawrence's smile faded. "She cries most days, barely eats, refuses to speak to me unless I force her." He paused. "But she's mine, and she'll learn." Cora set the tray down before she dropped it. "I need to get back to work." "Wait." He pulled a coin from his pocket, set it on the table. "For your trouble. And a message. If you ever want to visit your sister, you're welcome at Greer Ranch. I'm sure she'd love to see you." Cora took the coin because refusing would cause a scene. Then she walked back to the kitchen, hands shaking, heart pounding. She didn't tell Ruth. She didn't tell anyone. But that night, lying in her narrow bed, she thought about Margot, trapped, pregnant, crying in a house that wasn't hers with a man who'd bought her like livestock. And Cora realized that escaping hadn't been enough, because the world that had made her invisible had done the same to Margot. And unless something changed, unless someone fought back, it would keep happening. To other girls, other women, other lives that didn't matter to men like Lawrence Greer and Edmund Whitlock. Cora stared at the ceiling and made a decision. She would survive, she would save, and when she had enough money, enough strength, enough audacity, she would build something different. A place where women like her and Margot didn't have to be sold. A place where they could choose. It would take years. It would take everything she had. But for the first time in her life, Cora Whitlock had a purpose that wasn't survival. It was revolution. And she was just getting started. Revolution turned out to be slower than Cora expected. 2 years passed in Salvation, each day blurring into the next. She cooked, she served, she saved. The jar under her bed grew heavier, $70, then $90, then $100. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough for what she had in mind, but it was something. Ruth noticed the change in her. "You're different," she said one morning, watching Cora knead bread with a ferocity that went beyond making dough. "Angrier." "I'm the same." "No, you're not. You got a plan brewing in that head of yours?" Cora didn't answer. Plans were dangerous when spoken aloud. They turned into expectations, and expectations could be crushed. She kept her head down, kept working, kept listening to the conversations that flowed through the Broken Spoke like water. Miners talked about claims and veins and who struck it rich. Businessmen talked about opportunities and investments and expansion. And occasionally men like Lawrence Greer came through, talking about land and cattle and the women they owned. Cora listened to all of it, filing away information she didn't yet know how to use. Then one night in late summer, everything shifted. The man who walked into the Broken Spoke didn't look like the others. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 35, with dark hair and a face that had seen weather and worse. But it was his eyes that caught Cora's attention. Gray, distant, like he was looking at something no one else could see. He sat at the bar, ordered whiskey, and didn't speak to anyone. Ruth noticed him too. "That's Silas Vance," she said quietly, leaning close to Cora. "Owns a ranch about 20 miles south. Used to come in regular, few years back. Then his wife died, and his daughter disappeared. Hasn't been the same since." Cora glanced at him again. He was staring into his glass like it held answers. "What happened to the daughter?" "Depends who you ask. Some say she ran off. Some say the wife's family took her. Some say worse." Ruth shrugged. "Point is, he lost everything that mattered. Been running that ranch alone ever since. Barely speaks to anyone anymore. They call him the quiet man." Cora watched him for another moment, then went back to work. Tragic men were everywhere out here. She didn't have time for their stories. But Silas came back the next night, and the night after that. He always sat in the same spot, ordered the same drink, stayed exactly 1 hour, and left without saying more than 3 words. Cora served him twice, got a nod in return, nothing else. The third week, Ruth pulled her aside. "He's been asking about you." Cora froze. "What?" "Not asking, just watching. Listening when you talk. I've seen that look before." "What look?" "The look a man gets when he's thinking about something stupid." Ruth crossed her arms. "Be careful with that one. He's broken in ways most men aren't." Cora wanted to say she wasn't interested, that she had plans that didn't involve any man, broken or otherwise. But something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way he looked as alone as she felt. Either way, she started paying attention. Silas came in every Friday night for 2 months. Same routine, same silence. Then one night in October, he stayed past his usual hour. Cora was wiping down tables when he finally spoke. "You're Edmund Whitlock's daughter." She nearly dropped the rag. "How do you—" "Saw you talking to Lawrence Greer a while back. Heard him say your name." His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "You ran away." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Good." Cora straightened, studied him. "You know Lawrence?" "I know of him. Knows how to take things that aren't his." Silas finished his drink, set the glass down carefully. "Your sister's still with him?" "As far as I know." "That bother you?" The question was too direct, too sharp. Cora felt her defenses rise. "Why would it?" "Because you're here and she's there, and you look like someone who thinks about that more than you should." Cora set the rag down. "You don't know anything about me." "No," Silas agreed. "But I know what running looks like, and I know what guilt looks like. You got both." She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but he wasn't. "What do you want?" she asked instead. Silas stood, pulled a few coins from his pocket, left them on the bar. "Nothing. Just thought you should know. Lawrence Greer's expanding, buying up land, pushing out smaller ranchers. My place is next on his list." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're smart enough to care." He headed for the door, paused. "And because if you ever want to do something about men like him, you'll need allies." Then he was gone. Cora stood there, heart pounding, mind racing. She didn't know what game Silas Vance was playing, but she knew one thing. He'd just cracked open a door she'd been trying to find for 2 years. The next Friday, she waited for him. He came in at 8, same as always, but this time when she brought his drink, she sat down across from him. "I'm listening," she said. Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then he started talking. His ranch, he explained, sat on land that Lawrence Greer wanted. Not for cattle. The soil was too dry, the grass too sparse. But there was copper underneath. Not a lot, but enough to make someone rich if they knew how to dig it out. "Greer's been making offers," Silas said. "Low ones. When I refused, he started making things difficult, cutting off my water access, running his cattle through my land, scaring off anyone I try to hire. Why not just sell? Because it's mine. I built it with my wife. She's buried there. His jaw tightened. I'm not giving it to him. Cora understood that kind of stubbornness. It was the same thing that had kept her scrubbing floors for years before she finally broke. What do you need? Help. Someone who's not afraid of hard work and harder men. Someone who's got a reason to fight back. You think that's me? I know it is. I've watched you for 3 months. You're tougher than half the miners in here and smarter than most of the businessmen. And you've got something to prove. He wasn't wrong. What's the pay? Room, board, and whatever profit we make if we survive. He paused. It's not much, and there's a good chance we fail. Then why try? Because failing while fighting is better than winning by giving up. Cora thought about her jar of money, her plans, her revolution that had been moving at the speed of cold honey. She thought about Margot, pregnant and crying in Lawrence Greer's house. She thought about every man who'd ever looked through her like she was glass. When do I start? Silas almost smiled. Almost. Soon as you're ready. She gave Ruth notice the next day. Ruth didn't try to talk her out of it. You're making a mistake, she said, but there was something like respect in her voice. But at least it's your mistake. Cora packed her things, still just 2 dresses, still just 1 bag, but now with $143 tucked in the lining. She said goodbye to the girls at the Broken Spoke, women who'd become something like friends, women who understood what it meant to build a life from scraps. Then she climbed into Silas Vance's wagon and left Salvation behind. The ranch was worse than she expected. 20 miles south, tucked against the base of mountains that looked like they'd been chewed up and spit out. The house was small, weathered, surrounded by land that stretched in every direction but felt empty anyway. A barn that leaned slightly left, fences that needed mending, cattle that looked half-starved. This is it, Silas said, pulling the wagon to a stop. Cora climbed down, boots hitting dust that rose and fell like breath. It's, bad. I know. He grabbed her bag, headed toward the house. But it's mine. Inside wasn't much better. 1 main room with a stove, table, and chairs that didn't match. 2 bedrooms, 1 clearly unused. Everything coated in dust and neglect. You take that one, Silas said, nodding toward the smaller bedroom. I'll be in the barn most nights anyway. Why the barn? Because the house remembers things I'd rather forget. He said it simply, like commenting on weather, but Cora heard the weight underneath. She set her bag down, looked around the room that would be hers. It was bigger than the one at the Broken Spoke, cleaner than the one in Temper's Creek, and completely, utterly hers. Thank you, she said. Silas nodded once, then left her alone. That first night, Cora lay in an actual bed with actual sheets and listened to the silence. It was different out here, deeper, lonelier, broken only by wind and the occasional sound of cattle settling. She thought about what she'd agreed to, working for a man she barely knew, on land that was already marked for destruction, fighting a battle she'd probably lose. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The work started before dawn. Silas woke her by knocking once on her door, didn't wait for an answer. By the time she stumbled outside, he was already feeding the cattle, moving with the kind of efficiency that came from doing the same thing every day for years. Can you ride? He asked. No. Can you mend fence? I can learn. Good. Start there. He pointed to a section of fence that looked like it had been kicked apart. Wires in the barn. Tools, too. I'll be back by noon. Then he mounted his horse and rode off, leaving Cora standing in the yard with no idea what she was doing. She found the wire, found the tools, stared at the fence like it was a puzzle she hadn't been given the pieces to. It took her 4 hours to fix 20 feet of fence. Her hands were bleeding by the time Silas returned. He looked at her work, looked at her hands, said nothing. It's not good, Cora admitted. No, but you didn't quit. That's something. He showed her how to do it properly, how to pull the wire tight, how to twist it without tearing her palms apart, how to brace the posts so they wouldn't lean. By the end of the week, she could mend fence almost as fast as he could. By the end of the month, she was doing it better. The days fell into a rhythm. Wake before dawn, feed the cattle, mend what was broken, haul water from the creek when the well ran dry, cook meals that were more function than flavor, collapse into bed with muscles screaming. Silas spoke only when necessary. Instructions, corrections, the occasional observation about weather. He was teaching her, Cora realized, but not through words, through demonstration, repetition, and the expectation that she'd figure it out. It was harder than anything she'd done at the Broken Spoke, harder than years of scrubbing floors in Temper's Creek. But it was hers. 2 months in, Lawrence Greer made his move. They woke to find this creek blocked. Someone had dammed it upstream, cutting off their water supply. The cattle were already getting restless, bawling in the heat. Silas saddled his horse without a word. "Where are you going?" Cora asked. "To fix it." "Alone?" "Yes." "That's stupid." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You can't ride well enough to keep up. And if Greer's men are there, it'll get ugly. Then take a gun." "I have a gun." "Take 2. Something almost like amusement crossed his face. "You worried about me?" "I'm worried about losing my job." He handed her a rifle from the rack by the door. "Know how to use this?" "Point and shoot?" "Close enough. Anyone comes near the house, fire a warning shot. If they don't leave, fire again. Aim lower the second time." Then he was gone, riding toward the mountains, leaving Cora alone with a rifle and instructions that might get her killed. She spent the next 6 hours pacing, checking the windows, jumping at every sound. The cattle were getting louder, more agitated. The sun climbed higher, hotter, merciless. By noon, she couldn't stand it anymore. She found Silas's old mare in the barn, a gentle thing too old for real work. She managed to get a saddle on, barely managed to climb up, and pointed the horse toward the mountains. The ride was terrifying. She clung to the saddle, legs gripping too tight, bouncing with every step. But the mare was patient, following the trail Silas had taken, and eventually they reached the creek. She heard voices before she saw them. Men arguing, Silas's voice low and steady, another voice loud and aggressive. Cora slid off the horse, grabbed the rifle, and crept closer. Silas stood in the creek bed, facing 3 men on horseback. One of them was pointing a rifle at him. "Last chance, Vance. Sell, or we make sure you can't." "Can't sell what I don't own anymore," Silas said calmly. The man laughed. "What the hell does that mean?" "Means I signed the deed over yesterday. Ranch belongs to someone else now." Cora's blood went cold. He'd sold. He'd given up. "Who?" the man demanded. "My wife." A pause. Then, "Your wife's dead." "My new wife." Cora stepped out from behind the rocks before she could think better of it. "That'd be me." All 4 men turned. Silas's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or anger, or something else entirely. The man with the rifle looked her up and down. "This is a joke. Does it look like I'm laughing?" Cora raised her rifle, hand steadier than she felt. "You're on my land. Leave." "Mr. Greer's not going to like this." "Mr. Greer can take it up with my husband." The men exchanged glances. This wasn't what they'd expected. A woman changed things, made it messier, more complicated, harder to justify. The leader spat into the dirt. "This ain't over." "Probably not," Cora agreed. "But today it is." They left slowly, making sure everyone knew they weren't scared, just inconvenienced. When they were gone, Silas turned to her. "What the hell was that?" "Saving your life, apparently. I had it handled." "You had a gun pointed at your chest. And you had no business being here." His voice was harder now, edged with something sharp. "I told you to stay at the house." "You told me a lot of things. I'm selective about which ones I follow." He stared at her, jaw tight, and for a moment Cora thought he might actually yell, but then something in him shifted. "Wife," he said. "It was the first thing I thought of." "Quick thinking. Is it going to cause problems?" Silas looked at the creek, at the dam his enemies had built, at the mountains where his daughter had disappeared and his wife had died. "Probably, but we already had those." They worked in silence, breaking apart the dam, letting water flow back toward the ranch. It took hours, left them both soaked and exhausted, but by the time they rode back, the creek was running again. That night, over a dinner of beans and bread, Silas finally spoke. "We need to make it legal," Cora looked up from her plate. What? The marriage. If Greer checks, and he will, he'll find out it's a lie. Then the deed transfer won't hold. So what are you suggesting? We go to town tomorrow, find a minister, make it real. He paused. On paper, anyway. Cora set down her fork. You want to marry me? I want to keep my land. This is the fastest way to do it. And what do I get? Half ownership. Whatever we build together. If we survive, you walk away with something. If we don't, he shrugged. At least you tried. It was possibly the worst marriage proposal in history. Cora should have said no, should have walked away, found another path, stuck to her original plan. But she'd learned something in the past 2 months. Plans were useless without power, and power, out here, came from land. All right, she said, but we do this my way. Clear terms, clear boundaries. This is business. Agreed. They shook hands across the table, sealing a deal that was equal parts desperation and defiance. The next day, they rode into the nearest town, a place called Copper Hollow, bigger than Salvation, but just as rough. They found a minister who didn't ask questions, paid him $5, and signed papers that made Cora Whitlock into Cora Vance. The ceremony took 4 minutes. Silas didn't kiss her, didn't even look at her. They rode back to the ranch in silence, now legally bound to each other and the land they were fighting for. That night, lying in her room, Cora stared at the plain ring Silas had bought from the general store. It was thin, cheap, already starting to tarnish. But it was a weapon, and she was going to use it. The next 3 months were a war of attrition. Lawrence Greer didn't take the marriage well. He sent men to intimidate them, to sabotage their work, to make it clear that legal papers didn't mean much when you had money and muscle. Fences got cut in the night. Cattle disappeared. The well was poisoned twice, forcing them to haul water from miles away. But Cora and Silas kept working. She learned to shoot straight, to ride hard, to fix things that broke and break things that needed fixing. She learned the land, learned the cattle, learned to read weather and tracks, and the particular silence that meant trouble was coming. Silas taught her without words, expected her to keep up, never made allowances for the fact that she was a woman, or new to this, or exhausted beyond measure. It should have broken her. Instead, it made her stronger. They fell into a partnership that was part necessity, part mutual respect. They worked side by side, ate meals in companionable silence, dealt with each crisis as it came. And slowly, something shifted between them. It started small. Silas asking her opinion on where to move the cattle, Cora noticing when he favored his left leg, both of them learning to read each other's moods without speaking. One night, after a particularly brutal day of hauling water, Cora collapsed at the table, too tired to even eat. Silas set a plate in front of her. You need to eat. I need to sleep for 3 days. Eat first, sleep after. She forced down a few bites, watching him move around the kitchen with the same efficiency he brought to everything. He'd taken off his hat, and his hair was damp with sweat, streaked with dust. Why'd your wife's family take your daughter? The question came out before Cora could stop it. Silas went still. Who told you that? Ruth, back in Salvation. A long silence. Then, they didn't take her. I gave her to them. Cora set down her fork. Why? Because I was drinking myself to death and the ranch was falling apart, and she deserved better. His voice was flat, emotionless. Her grandmother came, said she'd raise her proper, give her a real life. I signed the papers. Do you regret it? Every day. He said it simply, like admitting the sky was blue, and Cora understood then what Ruth had meant. Silas wasn't just broken, he'd broken himself, deliberately, and was living in the wreckage. What was her name? Cora asked softly. Emma. She was 5. How long ago? 3 years. Feels like yesterday. Feels like forever. Cora wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but she'd never been good at that. I had a sister, she said instead. Margot. She got sold to Lawrence Greer. I ran away and left her there. Silas looked at her then, really looked at her. That why you're here? Guilt? Partly. Mostly I'm here because I'm tired of men like Greer taking whatever they want. And you think fighting him here will change that? I think it's a start. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two broken people who'd found each other by accident and decided to make something out of wreckage. We should sleep, Silas said finally. Tomorrow's going to be worse. He was right. The next day they woke to find half their cattle missing, driven off in the night. It was the boldest move Greer had made yet, and it left them dangerously short on resources. Silas wanted to ride after them. Cora stopped him. That's what he wants. You go after them alone, you don't come back. So I do nothing? No, you do something smarter. She'd been thinking about this for weeks, ever since the creek incident. Lawrence Greer had money and men and power. But he also had enemies, other ranchers he'd squeezed, businessmen he'd cheated, people who wanted him gone but were too scared to move first. We build a coalition, Cora said. Find everyone he's hurt. Make them see that together we're stronger than apart. Silas looked skeptical. These men don't trust each other. Half of them would sell their own mothers for the right price. Then we give them a better price. We show them that fighting back is more profitable than giving in. And how do we do that? Cora smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We hit him where it hurts. His reputation. Over the next 2 weeks, they rode out to every small ranch, every struggling operation, every person who'd been on the wrong end of Lawrence Greer's ambition. Most of them slammed doors in their faces, but a few listened. There was Marcus Webb, a black rancher who'd been denied water rights. There was the widow Chen, whose husband had died in suspicious circumstances after refusing to sell. There was a young couple, barely 20, who'd lost everything when Greer's men burned their barn. Cora talked to all of them. She didn't promise victory. She didn't promise justice. She promised something better, the chance to fight back. He's counting on us being too scared, too divided, too beaten down to resist, she told them. Let's prove him wrong. By the end of the month, they had 7 families willing to stand together. It wasn't an army, but it was something. They met in Silas's barn, this ragtag group of stubborn people who decided that losing while fighting was better than surviving on their knees. Cora stood in front of them, heart pounding, and laid out her plan. It was risky, it was probably stupid, but it was a chance, and that was more than any of them had yesterday. The plan was simple, which meant it would probably go wrong in complicated ways. Lawrence Greer was hosting a cattle auction in 2 weeks, a big one, with buyers coming from as far as Denver. He'd been bragging about it for months, using it to prove he was the biggest rancher in the territory, the man everyone had to deal with. Cora's plan was to make sure the auction failed spectacularly. He's expecting 300 head of cattle, she explained to the group gathered in the barn. But half of those are actually ours, stolen over the past 6 months. If we can prove it, in front of all those buyers, his reputation collapses. Marcus Webb crossed his arms. How do we prove it? Brand records. Every cow he's claiming as his should have a bill of sale, transfer papers, something showing he bought them legal. We get our hands on those records, we can show which ones don't match up. And how exactly do we get his records? The widow Chen asked. Cora looked at Silas. He'd been quiet through the whole meeting, leaning against the barn wall, face unreadable. We steal them, he said. The room went silent. That's insane, someone muttered. Probably, Silas agreed. But it's also our only shot. Greer keeps his records in his office, places guarded, but not well. 2 men, maybe 3. If we time it right, when everyone's focused on the auction setup, we might get in and out. Might, Marcus repeated. That's not exactly reassuring. Nothing about this is reassuring, Cora said. But we're past the point of safe options. We either do this or we pack up and leave. Those are the choices. She watched the faces around her, scared, angry, desperate. These weren't fighters, they were farmers and ranchers, and people who just wanted to be left alone. But Lawrence Greer hadn't left them alone, and now they were here, in a dusty barn, planning something that could get them all killed. I'm in, the widow Chen said quietly. One by one, the others nodded. Cora felt something tight in her chest loosen. They had a chance, a small one, but real. The next 2 weeks were chaos. They spent days preparing, mapping out Greer's property, timing the guard rotations, gathering evidence of their stolen cattle. Cora rode out to each ranch, documenting brands, collecting bills of sale, building a case that would hold up even under scrutiny. Silas taught her how to move quietly, how to pick simple locks, how to fight if things went bad. They practiced in the barn after dark, him correcting her stance, her learning to anticipate his moves. "You're thinking too much," he said one night, after she'd hesitated on a lock for the third time. "Your hands know what to do. Trust them." "Easy for you to say. You've done this before." "Once or twice." He didn't elaborate, and Cora didn't push. Everyone out here had a past they didn't talk about. She got better, faster, more confident. By the end of the first week, she could pick the practice lock in under a minute. But the nights were harder. Cora lay awake, staring at the ceiling, running through everything that could go wrong. They'd be outnumbered, outgunned, and if they got caught, there'd be no trial, no justice, just a bullet and a shallow grave. She thought about writing to Margot, just in case. But what would she say? "I'm sorry I left you. I'm trying to fix it by stealing from your husband and probably getting killed." "Hope you're doing well." No. Some things were better left unwritten. 3 days before the auction, Silas found her in the barn, sitting on a hay bale, staring at nothing. "You scared?" he asked. "Terrified." "Good. Means you're paying attention." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You don't have to do this. I can go alone." "No, you can't. I've done worse with less. Maybe. But this isn't just about you anymore." She looked at him, at the scars on his hands, the lines around his eyes that came from squinting into sun and grief. "We started this together. We finish it together." Something shifted in his expression. "You're stubborn as hell, you know that? I've been told." "Your father must have hated it." "My father didn't notice it. I was invisible to him." She paused. "That's what made leaving easy. Hard to miss something you never saw." Silas was quiet for a moment, then, "I see you." 3 words, simple, true. Cora felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept locked down for so long she'd forgotten it was there. "I know," she said. They sat in silence, the barn dark around them, the weight of what was coming pressing down like a physical thing. "If this goes wrong," Silas started. "It won't. But if it does, then we go down fighting. That's the deal, right?" He almost smiled. "Yeah, that's the deal." The night before the auction, Cora couldn't sleep at all. She got up before dawn, made coffee that tasted like mud, sat at the table watching the sky lighten. Silas appeared a few minutes later, moving quiet as always. "Ready?" he asked. "No. You?" "Not even close." They drank coffee in silence, both of them thinking about what they had to do. The plan was set. Cora would create a distraction at the auction while Silas broke into the office. She'd argued for the opposite. She should be the one breaking in. He should handle the crowd. But Silas had shut that down fast. "You're better with people," he'd said. "And if something goes wrong, you can talk your way out. I can't." He was right, but Cora hated it anyway. Hated the idea of him in danger while she played performer. But she'd learned to pick her battles, and this wasn't one she could win. By mid-morning, the others started arriving. Marcus brought his 2 sons, both young and nervous but willing. The widow Chen came with a rifle and a look that said she'd use it. The young couple showed up with forged invitations to the auction, good enough to get them through the gate. "Everyone knows what to do?" Cora asked. Nods all around. "Then let's go make some trouble." The ride to Greer's ranch took 2 hours. Cora spent it going over the plan again and again, looking for holes, for mistakes, for anything they'd missed. Beside her, Silas rode in silence, face set, eyes distant. "You thinking about your daughter?" she asked quietly. "Always. After this, maybe you could—" "Don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't make plans for after. There might not be an after." "There will be." "You don't know that." "No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway." He looked at her then, something complicated in his expression. "You're either very brave or very stupid." Probably both. They arrived at Greer's ranch just after noon. The place was massive. Sprawling house, barns bigger than most people's homes, corrals filled with cattle that probably weren't all his. Men moved everywhere, setting up for the auction, arranging pens, checking paperwork. Cora split off from Silas at the gate, heart pounding. This was it. No going back now. She made her way to the auction area where buyers were already gathering. Rich men in expensive suits, talking about head counts and market prices and the quality of Greer's stock. She moved through the crowd, listening, watching, waiting for her moment. Lawrence Greer stood on a platform, playing the gracious host, shaking hands and making promises. He looked older than Cora remembered, grayer, but still carried himself like he owned the world. When his eyes landed on her, she saw recognition flicker, then confusion. "Cora Whitlock," he said loud enough to draw attention. "I'll be damned. What brings you here?" "It's Cora Vance now," she said, keeping her voice steady. "And I'm here to buy cattle, same as everyone else." "Vance?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You married that broken-down rancher? How desperate were you?" The crowd tittered. Cora felt heat rise in her face but forced it down. This was part of the plan. Draw his attention, keep him focused on her. Desperate enough to marry a man who earned his land instead of stealing it. The laughter stopped. Greer's expression hardened. "Careful, girl. You're on my property. I'd hate for something unfortunate to happen." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Cora took a step closer, ignoring the way her hands shook. "Then let me make one too." "This auction? It's built on lies. Half these cattle aren't yours. You stole them, and I can prove it," the crowd murmured. Greer's face went red. "You've got no proof of anything." "Don't I?" Cora pulled a stack of papers from her coat. Brand records, bills of sale, transfer documents. "These are from every rancher you've squeezed in the past year. Every cow you've taken. Every brand you've altered. It's all here." She was bluffing. The real proof was in his office, where Silas was hopefully right now, breaking in and finding the records they actually needed. But Greer didn't know that. "Those are forgeries," he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Then you won't mind if we compare them to your records?" "Right here. Right now. In front of all these buyers." The crowd shifted. Some of the buyers looked interested. Others looked nervous. Nobody liked being part of a scandal, especially one that might cost them money. Greer stepped down from the platform, moving toward Cora with the kind of deliberate calm that preceded violence. "You're making a mistake." "Probably, but I'm good at those." He was 3 feet away when the first shout went up. "Fire! There's a fire in the east barn!" Chaos erupted. Men ran toward the smoke, buyers scattered, and Greer spun around, face twisted with rage and confusion. Cora took the opportunity to slip away, moving against the crowd, heading toward the main house. The fire was part of the plan, a small one, controlled, started by Marcus's sons to create exactly this kind of confusion. She made it to the office just as Silas came out, arms full of ledgers and papers, face grim. "Got it?" she asked. "Most of it, but we've got company." 2 of Greer's men appeared around the corner, guns drawn. "Drop the papers," one of them said. Silas looked at Cora. She looked at the men. Then she did something incredibly stupid. She threw her fake documents in the air, sending papers flying everywhere, and ran. The men hesitated. Go after her or Silas? And in that moment, Silas ran too, in the opposite direction, clutching the real records. Cora made it 10 yards before someone grabbed her from behind, yanking her back hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. She hit the ground, tasted blood, saw boots coming toward her face. Then gunfire. Not close. From the auction area. The widow Chen and her rifle creating another distraction, buying time. The man holding Cora hesitated, and she took the chance. She twisted, drove her elbow into his stomach, scrambled free. Her hands found a rock, and she swung without thinking, connected with something that crunched. The man went down. Cora ran, legs burning, lungs screaming. Behind her, more shouts, more gunfire, the whole ranch descending into chaos. She found Silas by the horses, already mounting, the stolen records tied to his saddle. "Where's the others?" he shouted. "Getting out! We need to go, now!" They rode hard, pushing the horses faster than was safe, putting distance between them and Greer's men. Behind them, smoke rose into the sky, and Cora knew the fire had spread beyond what they'd planned. "It's out of control," she said. "Can't stop now." They rode for an hour before slowing, checking behind them, seeing no pursuit. The others would scatter, take different routes, meet back at the Webb Ranch like they'd planned. Cora's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the reins. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. They had proof, evidence, enough to ruin Lawrence Greer. But as they crested a ridge and looked back, Cora saw the smoke still rising, black and thick, and knew the cost had been higher than they'd anticipated. "We need to get these to the territorial marshal," Silas said, patting the records. "In Copper Hollow. If we ride through the night, we can make it by dawn." "What about the others?" "They know the plan. They'll be fine." Cora wanted to believe him, but she'd seen the men with guns, heard the shots, watched chaos consume everything. "We can't stop," Silas said, reading her face. "Not now. We finished this." He was right. Stopping meant giving Greer time to cover his tracks, to spin the story, to turn them into the villains. They rode into the night, taking turns sleeping in the saddle, pushing through exhaustion and fear. The stars came out, cold and distant, and Cora thought about all the choices that had led here. Leaving Temper's Creek. Working at the Broken Spoke. Agreeing to help a broken man save his ranch. Every choice had seemed small at the time. But together, they'd built something bigger than survival. They'd built resistance. By the time they reached Copper Hollow, both of them were barely conscious. The horses were spent, legs trembling, foam at their mouths. The marshal's office was dark. Silas pounded on the door until a light appeared and a man opened up, looking annoyed until he saw their faces. "We need to report a crime," Cora said. The marshal, a middle-aged man named Carson, looked skeptical until Silas dumped the records on his desk. "Lawrence Greer," Silas said. "Cattle theft, brand alteration, fraud. It's all there." Carson picked up one of the ledgers, started reading. His expression changed. "Where'd you get these?" "His office." "You broke in?" "He stole our cattle first." Carson sat down, still reading. If this is real, this is big. Greer's got connections. Money. This isn't going to be simple." "Nothing about this has been simple," Cora said. "But it's the truth, and truth has to count for something." Carson looked at her for a long moment. "You related to Edmund Whitlock?" Cora's stomach dropped. "He's my father. Why?" "Because he's here, in Copper Hollow. Showed up 3 days ago looking for you." The world tilted. "Why?" Cora whispered. "Didn't say, just that he needed to find his daughter." Carson paused. "He's staying at the hotel, room 12. Cora looked at Silas. He was watching her, waiting. "You should go," he said quietly. "Not now. We need to keep. I'll handle the marshal. You handle your father." His jaw tightened. "Might be your only chance." Cora wanted to argue, but she was too tired, too overwhelmed. She nodded, left the office, walked through pre-dawn streets that were just starting to wake. The hotel was nicer than anything in Salvation, but still rough by Eastern standards. She climbed the stairs, found room 12, knocked before she could change her mind. Edmund Whitlock opened the door. He looked older, smaller somehow, like he'd been diminished by time and distance. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Cora, what are you doing here?" "Looking for you." He stepped back, let her in. The room was sparse, a bed, a chair, a small table. "I've been looking for 2 years." "Why?" Edmund sat down heavily. "Because I was wrong. About everything. About you, about Margot, about—" He stopped, looked at his hands. "Margot's dead." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "She died 6 months ago. Childbirth. The baby didn't make it either." His voice cracked. "Greer sent a telegram. Said she'd been weak, that she'd never recovered from the pregnancy. Said it like it was her fault." Cora couldn't breathe. "Margot. Gone. The sister she'd left behind. The sister she'd been fighting for without admitting it." "I went to the ranch," Edmund continued. "Demanded to see her grave. Greer laughed at me, said I'd sold her and didn't get to mourn her." He looked up, eyes red. He was right. No, he wasn't. "I sold both my daughters. You I ignored until you had to run. Margot I handed over like livestock." He stood, moved to the window. "I came here because I heard you were in the territory. Thought maybe— I don't know what I thought. that I could apologize, that I could help, that I could make it right? Cora's voice was bitter. You can't. Margot's dead. I spent years being invisible in your house. Those things don't get fixed. I know. Then why are you here? Edmund turned. Because I'm dying. Consumption. Doctor says I've got 6 months, maybe less. And I didn't want to die without telling you. He stopped, composed himself. Without telling you that you were right. To run. To fight. To refuse to be invisible. He pulled papers from his coat. I'm leaving you everything. The store, the house. What money's left. Constance doesn't know yet, but it's yours. Cora stared at the papers. Everything she'd once thought she wanted. Security, inheritance, acknowledgement. It meant nothing. I don't want it, she said. Cora, I don't want your money or your house or your guilt. She moved toward the door. I built something here. On my own. With people who see me. I'm not going back. I'm not asking you to. Edmund's voice was quiet. I'm asking you to take what's yours and use it however you want. Burn it down, sell it, give it away. I don't care. Just don't refuse it because of me. Cora stopped, hand on the doorknob. Keep the papers, she said. If I survive the next few days, I'll think about it. What happens in the next few days? War. She left before he could ask more, walked back to the marshal's office where Silas was still talking, still presenting evidence, still fighting. Carson looked up when she entered. You all right? No, but I will be. She looked at Silas. What did I miss? Marshal's sending a deputy to verify the records. If they check out, he'll arrest Greer. When? Soon as the deputy gets back. Day, maybe 2. Not soon enough. Greer would know they'd stolen his records by now. He'd be coming for them, for everyone who'd helped. We need to get back, Cora said. Warn the others. They rode out immediately, exhausted horses protesting every step. The sun climbed higher, hotter, and Cora felt like they were racing toward something inevitable. They reached the Webb Ranch by midday. It was burning, not the small controlled fire they'd set at Greer's place. This was total destruction. House, barn, everything consumed by flames that reached toward the sky. Marcus was on his knees in the dirt, face black with smoke, watching everything he'd built turn to ash. They came an hour ago, he said, voice hollow. Said it was payback. Said anyone who helped you would get the same. Cora felt rage so pure it almost choked her. Your sons. Safe. Got them out before... He couldn't finish. Silas was already moving, checking the other ranches, but Cora knew what they'd find. Greer had struck back fast and brutal, taking out anyone who dared to stand with them. By nightfall, they'd confirmed the damage. 3 ranches burned. The widow Chen shot, not killed, but close. The young couple run off their land, everything they owned destroyed. And Greer's men were still out there, hunting. They gathered what was left of their coalition in the ruins of Marcus's barn, 7 people who'd had everything and now had nothing but anger. We can't win, someone said. He's too powerful. We already won, Cora said. The marshal has the proof. Greer's going to pay. When? How long do we wait while he picks us off? As long as it takes. Easy for you to say. Your house isn't burning. Cora looked at each of them, scared, broken, defeated. You're right. My house isn't burning. You know why? Because I don't have one. I've been running and surviving and fighting since I was born. And I'm tired of it. But I'm not stopping now. Because the only thing worse than fighting and losing is not fighting at all. Silence. Then Marcus stood. She's right. We've come this far. We finish it. One by one, the others stood too. They spent the night planning, preparing for what they knew was coming. Greer wouldn't wait for the law. He'd come for them himself, finish what he started. The storm hit just before dawn. Not a metaphor, an actual storm, rolling in from the mountains with rain that fell like bullets and wind that tried to tear the world apart. Lightning cracked the sky, thunder shook the ground, and everything became chaos. Cora and Silas rode back to their ranch through the storm, water streaming down their faces, horses fighting every step. They made it home just as the real attack began. A dozen men on horseback, rifles drawn, led by Lawrence Greer himself. "Cora Vance!" he shouted over the storm. "Come out! This ends now!" Silas grabbed his rifle. "Stay inside." Not a chance. They went out together, into the storm, into the fight they'd been building toward since the day Cora had chosen to stop being invisible. Greer sat on his horse, rain running off his hat, eyes cold. "You've cost me everything. The auction's ruined. The marshal's investigating. My reputation's destroyed." He raised his rifle. "So I'm taking what's mine, starting with your lives." "You never owned us," Cora said. "I owned your sister. I'll own you too, one way or another." The words hit harder than any bullet could have. Cora raised her own rifle, hands steady despite the fear screaming through her. "Margot's death is on you, and you're going to answer for it." "To who? A territorial marshal? I've bought bigger men than him." Greer cocked his rifle. "Last chance. Walk away from this land or die on it." "We're not going anywhere," Silas said. Lightning struck close enough to make the horses scream. In the flash of light, Cora saw everything. Greer's men spreading out, weapons ready, her own small group of defenders scattered and outgunned. This was it. The moment that would define everything. Greer raised his hand, ready to give the order to fire. And then through the rain came the sound of horses. Lots of them. The territorial marshal rode in with 20 armed deputies surrounding Greer's men, rifles aimed and ready. "Lawrence Greer," Carson shouted, "you're under arrest for theft, fraud, arson, and attempted murder. Drop your weapons. Now!" For a long moment, nobody moved. Rain fell. Thunder rolled. The world held its breath. Then Greer lowered his rifle. His men followed, one by one, until they were all disarmed, defeated, finished. Carson rode up to Cora and Silas. "Records checked out. Every word. We've got enough to put him away for 20 years. Cora felt something release in her chest. Relief, exhaustion, victory so fragile it might shatter. Greer was pulled from his horse, hands bound, face twisted with rage. As they led him past, he looked at Cora. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," she said quietly. "It is." They took him away, through the storm, toward justice that had been too long coming. When they were gone, Cora stood in the rain, feeling it wash away blood and smoke and fear. Beside her, Silas lowered his rifle, shoulders sagging. "We did it," she said. "Yeah." His voice was rough. "We did." The storm raged around them, but for the first time in years, Cora felt something like peace. They'd fought, they'd survived, and they'd won. The rain stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the world washed clean and exhausted. Cora sat on the porch steps, watching the sky lighten, too wired to sleep despite the bone-deep fatigue that made her hands shake. Silas appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee that probably tasted terrible. He handed her one without speaking, sat down, and they watched the sunrise together. "You think it's really over?" she asked. "The fighting? Yeah. The rest of it?" He shrugged. "That's just starting." He was right. Greer was arrested, but his empire didn't disappear overnight. His ranch, his holdings, his debts, all of it would need to be sorted, distributed, fought over by lawyers and creditors and people looking to profit from his fall. "The others are going to need help rebuilding," Cora said. "We all are." She looked at the ranch around them. Fences still broken, barns still leaning, cattle still half-starved. Victory hadn't fixed any of that. It had just bought them the chance to try. "How much money do we have left?" she asked. "Maybe $40. You?" "About the same." She thought about her father's inheritance, still unclaimed, still sitting in a hotel room in Copper Hollow. "Might be more coming. Maybe." Silas raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. He'd learned when to let her talk and when to let her sit with things. They finished their coffee as the sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the storm clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called, and the cattle started moving, looking for grass that wasn't mud. "I'm going to check the fence line," Silas said, standing. "You should sleep." "I should do a lot of things." "Cora." She looked up at him, at the man who'd offered her a partnership when she had nothing, who'd fought beside her, who'd trusted her with his land and his life. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "Seeing me. When everyone else looked through me." Something shifted in his expression. "Hard not to see you. You make a lot of noise for someone who used to be invisible. Is that a complaint? No. He almost smiled. It's a compliment. He left to check the fences, and Cora went inside, meaning to sleep but ending up staring at the marriage certificate instead. 3 months old now, still just a piece of paper, still just a business arrangement. Except it hadn't felt like business when they'd stood in the rain with rifles, facing down Greer together. It hadn't felt like business when Silas had looked at her and said he saw her. Cora shoved the certificate back in the drawer. She was too tired to think about what anything meant. She'd sleep for a few hours, then figure out the next crisis. But sleep didn't come. Instead, there was a knock on the door. Edmund Whitlock stood on her porch, looking worse than he had 2 days ago. His skin was gray, his breathing labored, and Cora realized with a jolt that he probably wouldn't make it back to Pennsylvania. I heard about Greer's arrest, he said. I wanted to make sure you were all right. I'm fine. Can I come in? She should have said no. Should have sent him away, back to the hotel, back to whatever was left of his life. But something stopped her. Maybe pity, maybe curiosity, maybe the fact that he was dying and she didn't want that weight on her conscience. She stepped aside. Edmund moved slowly, like each step hurt. He sat at the table, accepted water when she offered it, looked around the small house that was nothing like the one in Tempers Creek. This is what you chose, he said. Not a question. Yes. It's smaller than I expected. It's mine. He nodded, conceding the point. I spoke with the marshal. He said you helped build the case against Greer. Said you were brave. I wasn't brave. I was angry. Same thing sometimes. He coughed, harsh and wet, and Cora saw blood on his handkerchief when he pulled it away. I went to Margot's grave before I came looking for you. It's on Greer's ranch. Was on his ranch. Just a marker, nothing fancy. She was alone out there. Cora's throat tightened. Did you bring her home? I tried, but the ground's frozen back east this time of year, and He coughed again. I won't make it back. So I had her moved. To the cemetery in Copper Hollow, bought a proper stone. Had them carve her real name, Margot Whitlock. Not Greer. She shouldn't have to carry his name into eternity. Something broke in Cora's chest. For all his failures, all his neglect, Edmund had done this one thing right. Thank you, she said. It's not enough. Nothing I do will be enough. He pulled the papers from his coat again, set them on the table. But this is what I have. The store's worth about $3,000. The house maybe $2,000. There's another $1,000 in the bank. It's all yours. Do whatever you want with it. Cora stared at the papers. $6,000. Enough to rebuild the ranch, to help the others, to make a real difference. Why now, she asked. Why not 10 years ago, when I was scrubbing your floors? Why not before you sold Margot? Edmund was quiet for a long time. Then, because I was a coward. I let Constance run the house because it was easier than standing up to her. I ignored you because acknowledging you meant acknowledging your mother, and that hurt too much. I sold Margot because Greer offered money, and I was too weak to say no. He looked at her, eyes watering. I don't have excuses, just failures. And now I'm dying and I can't fix any of it. But I can give you this. It won't make you love me, won't make you forgive me. But maybe it'll help you build something better than I ever did. Cora picked up the papers, felt their weight. What about Constance? She'll get the house after I die. That's all. The rest is yours. She'll fight it. Let her. By the time it gets to court, I'll be gone and the will's ironclad. I made sure of that. He stood slowly, painfully. I should go. I've taken enough of your time. Where will you go? Back to the hotel. Wait for the end. Won't be long now. Cora walked him to the door, watched him climb into the rented buggy with movements that looked like they cost him everything. Cora, he said, before driving away. Your mother would be proud of you. I thought you should know that. Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the doorway with papers worth $6,000 and feeling she didn't know how to process. Silas came back an hour later, found her still at the table, still staring at the inheritance. What's that? She explained, voice flat, watching his face for reaction. That's a lot of money, he said finally. Yes, but what are you going to do with it? I don't know. Part of me wants to burn it, pretend it doesn't exist. And the other part? Wants to use it, help rebuild, make something good out of something that was always bad. She looked at him. What would you do? Silas sat down across from her. I'd ask myself what I actually want, not what I should want, not what's practical. What do you want, Cora? It was such a simple question, but nobody had asked her that in 26 years. I want to build something that lasts, she said slowly. I want to help people like us, people who've been pushed down, pushed out, told they don't matter. I want to prove that we can fight back and win. And I want... She stopped, unsure. What? I want to stop running, stop surviving, actually live. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, the money could do all that, if you let it. It feels like giving up, like accepting something from him means forgiving him. Money doesn't care about forgiveness. It's just a tool. What matters is what you build with it. He was right. Cora had spent so long being defined by what was taken from her that she'd forgotten she could define herself by what she built. All right, she said. I'll take it. Use it. Make it mean something. Good. Silas stood. Now get some sleep. You look like death. Romantic. We're married. I'm allowed to be honest. The word hung between them. Married. They'd been avoiding it for months, treating it like the business arrangement it was supposed to be. But something had shifted in the rain, in the fight, in the quiet moments after. Silas? Sleep, Cora. We'll figure out the rest later. She did sleep finally, collapsing into bed and not waking until evening. When she got up, Silas had made dinner, beans and cornbread. Nothing fancy, but hot and filling. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from working side by side, from knowing each other's rhythms. I'm going to Copper Hollow tomorrow, Cora said. File the inheritance papers. Check on the others. See what the marshal needs from us. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I know. He met her eyes. But I'm going to anyway. They rode out the next morning, taking the wagon because Cora wanted to bring supplies for the families who'd lost everything. Food, blankets, tools, whatever they could spare and a little more. The ride to Copper Hollow felt different now, not desperate, not running, just traveling, together, toward whatever came next. The marshal's office was busy, filled with people filing complaints, making statements, trying to get compensation for what Greer had taken. Carson looked exhausted but satisfied. Cora Vance, he said when he saw her, come to give your official statement? Among other things, she spent 2 hours going through everything. The stolen cattle, the threats, the fire, the final confrontation. Carson wrote it all down, asked clarifying questions, built his case piece by piece. Greer's claiming self-defense, he said. Says you attacked him. He was protecting his property. That's a lie. I know, but his lawyers are good. This is going to trial and it's going to get ugly. Will he get convicted? With the evidence we have? Yeah, but it'll take time. Months, maybe a year. Cora nodded. She'd expected that. Justice was slow, especially when the accused had money for lawyers. What about his ranch? Silas asked. Seized by the territorial government pending trial. After conviction, it'll be auctioned off to pay his debts and victims. Can victims buy it? Carson looked surprised. You want Greer's ranch? No, but the families he destroyed might want a piece of it. Fair compensation for what they lost. I'll see what I can do. They left the marshal's office and went to the bank, where Cora filed her father's papers and officially claimed her inheritance. The banker looked skeptical, a young woman in work clothes claiming $6,000, but the papers were legal and witnessed, and he had no choice but to accept them. It'll take a few weeks to transfer everything, he said, but the money's yours. Cora walked out of that bank feeling like she'd grown 3 inches. $6,000. Hers. Not taken, not stolen, not owed, just hers. What now? Silas asked. Now we help the others. They spent the next 3 days riding to each ranch, each burned-out property, each family trying to rebuild. Cora offered money, not charity, but investment. Help us rebuild, she said, and when things are stable, we'll build something together. A coalition, like before, but permanent this time. Most of them agreed. A few were too broken, too scared, too ready to leave and never come back. Cora didn't judge them. She understood that impulse. But enough stayed. Enough believed. By the end of the week, they had a plan. Pool resources, share labor, build a network of small ranches that could support each other, protect each other, thrive together. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. They were riding back to their own ranch, exhausted but hopeful, when Silas finally spoke. "I need to tell you something." Cora looked at him. His face was serious, jaw tight, like he was bracing for impact. "What?" "I wrote to my wife's family, asked about Emma, my daughter." Cora's breath caught. "When?" 2 weeks ago, before the auction. Figured if things went bad, I wanted to at least try." He pulled a letter from his coat. "Got a response yesterday." "And?" "She's alive, living with her grandmother in Kansas. She's 8 now." His voice cracked slightly. "They sent a photograph." He handed it to Cora, a small girl with dark hair and serious eyes, standing next to an older woman, both of them unsmiling for the camera. "She looks like you," Cora said softly. "Yeah." He took the photograph back, stared at it like he was memorizing every detail. "They say I can visit, if I want. If I'm—" He stopped. "If I'm sober and stable and can prove I won't hurt her." "You wouldn't hurt her." "I did, though. I gave her away." "You gave her a chance at a better life. That's not the same as hurting her." Silas was quiet for a long time. Then, "I want to go see her. See if she even remembers me. See if there's a chance—" He couldn't finish. "Then go," Cora said. "I'll manage the ranch. It's not just my decision anymore. We're partners, married. What affects me affects you. I know, and I'm telling you to go. Bring her back if you can, if she wants to come. This place could use a kid." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Cora saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not just gratitude. Something deeper. "Come with me," he said. "What?" "Come with me. To Kansas. Meet Emma. Help me figure out what to say to her." He paused. "I can't do this alone." Cora thought about the ranch, about the rebuilding that needed to happen, about the coalition they were trying to build. Then she thought about the man beside her, asking for help for the first time since she'd known him. "All right," she said. "When do we leave?" "Soon as we get things settled here." It took another week to arrange everything. Marcus agreed to watch their cattle. The widow Chen would coordinate the rebuilding efforts. Everyone understood Silas was going to get his daughter back, and that mattered more than fences or property lines. They took the train east, a luxury Cora had never experienced. 3 days of watching the country roll past, of sleeping in actual beds, of conversations that stretched for hours because they had nothing but time. Silas talked about Emma, what she'd been like as a baby, how she'd laughed, how she'd followed him everywhere until the day he'd sent her away. He talked about his wife, about the fire that had taken her, about the drinking that had followed. Cora talked about Margot, about the guilt that still sat heavy in her chest, about the anger that had driven her west and the determination that had kept her going. They were two broken people, she realized, trying to piece themselves back together. Maybe that's all anyone was. Kansas appeared flat and endless, so different from the mountains of Colorado. They took a buggy from the train station to a small town called Milford, found the address Emma's grandmother had sent. The house was modest but well kept, with a garden out front and lace curtains in the windows. Silas stood on the sidewalk, staring at it like it might disappear. "You ready?" Cora asked. "No." "Good. Let's go anyway." She knocked on the door before he could change his mind. The woman who answered was in her 60s, with gray hair pulled into a bun and eyes that assessed them both in seconds. "Silas Vance," she said. Not a question. "Mrs. Patterson, thank you for agreeing to see me. I didn't do it for you. I did it for Emma. She has a right to know her father." She looked at Cora. "And you are?" "Cora Vance, Silas's wife." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "He didn't mention a wife in his letter." "Recent development," Silas said. "I see." She stepped back, let them in. "Emma's in the parlor. She knows you're coming. I told her who you are, but she doesn't remember you. You understand that?" "Yes, ma'am." The parlor was small, filled with furniture that looked like it had been there for generations, and sitting on a chair, feet swinging because they didn't quite touch the floor, was Emma. She looked exactly like her photograph and nothing like it at the same time. Bigger, more real, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's delicate features. She looked at Silas without recognition. "Hello, Emma," he said, voice rough. I'm your father. I know, grandmother told me." Her voice was small, careful. "Are you going to take me away?" "No, I just wanted to meet you, see how you're doing." "I'm doing fine." Silas knelt down so they were at eye level. "I know I haven't been there. I know I made a mistake sending you here. I was in a bad place, and I thought you'd be better off without me. But I've been trying to do better, and I wanted you to know that I think about you every day." Emma studied him with the seriousness of a child who'd learned not to trust adults too easily. "Grandmother says you drank a lot, that you were sad." "That's true. I was very sad. Your mother died, and I didn't know how to be a father without her." "Are you still sad?" Silas glanced at Cora, then back at Emma. "Sometimes, but not as much. I have help now." Emma looked at Cora. "Are you my new mother?" Cora's heart clenched. I'm your father's wife. If you want, you can call me Cora." "Okay." They sat in that parlor for 2 hours, talking carefully, learning each other. Emma told them about school, about her friends, about the cat she'd named Button. Silas told her about the ranch, about the cattle, about the mountains. He didn't ask her to come home, didn't push, just let her see that he was there, that he was trying, that he cared. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged her grandmother, then surprised everyone by hugging Silas, too. "Will you come back?" she asked. "If you want me to." "I do." "Then I will." Outside, walking back to the buggy, Silas was silent. Cora waited, letting him process. "She didn't know me," he said finally. "But she wanted to. That's something." "Is it enough?" "It's a start." They stayed in Milford for 3 days, visiting Emma each afternoon, building something fragile and new. Mrs. Patterson watched carefully, assessing whether Silas was truly changed or just performing. On the 3rd day, she pulled Cora aside. "He seems different than the letters my daughter wrote," she said. "Calmer, more present." "He is." "Because of you?" "Because of himself. I just gave him a reason to try." Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. "Emma likes you. That matters." "I like her too." "If Silas wants her back, wants to be her father again, it won't be simple. There will be conditions. Visits first, then weekends. Then we'll see." "That's fair." "And if he drinks again, if he fails her again, she comes back to me. Permanently. Understood?" "Understood." They left Kansas with a promise to return in 3 months, to keep writing, to build trust slowly. Emma stood on the porch, waving until they were out of sight. On the train back, Silas was quieter than usual. Cora let him sit with his thoughts until finally, somewhere in Colorado, he spoke. "Thank you." "For what?" "Coming with me. Being there. Helping me not completely fall apart." "You didn't fall apart." "I wanted to. When she didn't recognize me, I wanted to run. You stopped me." "You would have stayed anyway." "Maybe. But it was easier with you there." He looked at her. "You're good at this. Being a partner." Cora felt heat rise in her face. "So are you." "I meant what I said about Emma. If she comes back, it changes things. The ranch, our arrangement, everything." "I know." "And you're okay with that?" Cora thought about the little girl with serious eyes, about the way Silas's whole face had changed when she'd hugged him, about the possibility of building something more than just a business partnership. "Yeah," she said, "I'm okay with that." They arrived back at the ranch to find chaos. Not the bad kind, the productive kind. Marcus and the widow Chen had organized a barn raising, and half the territory seemed to be there, hammering and sawing and building. "What's all this?" Silas asked. Marcus grinned. "Figured you needed a proper barn, something that doesn't lean. Thought we'd surprise you." Cora looked at the half-finished structure, at the people working together, at the community they'd built from nothing, and felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. That night, After everyone had gone home and the barn stood solid and straight, Cora and Silas sat on the porch. "We should talk," Silas said. "About? Us? This marriage? What it is? What it isn't?" Cora's heart started pounding. "Okay. When we got married, it was business, survival, a way to keep the land. I remember. But it's not just that anymore. Is it?" She looked at him, at the man who'd trusted her when she had nothing, who'd fought beside her, who'd let her see him at his worst and his best. "No," she said quietly. "It's not." "So what is it?" Cora took a breath. "It's real, if you want it to be." Silas reached for her hand, rough fingers closing around hers. "I want it to be." He kissed her then, careful and tentative, and Cora kissed him back, letting 3 months of partnership and trust turn into something more. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I don't know when it happened, but I do." "I love you too," Cora whispered. "I didn't plan to, but I do." They sat there on the porch as the stars came out, holding hands, building something neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. A real marriage, a real partnership, a real life. And for the first time in 26 years, Cora Vance, felt like she'd finally come home. Winter came early that year, bringing snow that buried the valleys and turned the mountains into something beautiful and deadly. Cora stood at the window, watching ice form on the edges of the glass, and thought about how much had changed in 6 months. The ranch was thriving, not just surviving, actually growing. The new barn stood solid against the wind, filled with hay they'd put up in autumn. The cattle were fat and healthy, grazing on land that finally belonged to them without question. And the house, once empty and haunted, now felt like something worth protecting. Silas came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "You're thinking too loud," he said. "I'm thinking about Emma, whether she's warm enough in Kansas, whether Mrs. Patterson remembered to fix that leak in the roof before the snow came." "She's fine, stop worrying." "I can't help it. She's—" Cora stopped, unsure how to finish. "Yours," Silas said quietly. "She's yours too now. You're allowed to worry." 3 months had passed since Kansas. They'd made the trip twice more, each visit longer, each one building something stronger between Silas and his daughter. Emma had started calling him Papa again, tentatively at first, then with more confidence, and she'd started calling Cora by name without the careful distance she'd had at first. Mrs. Patterson had written last week. The letter sat on the kitchen table, read and reread until Cora had memorized every word. "Emma asks about you constantly. She wants to know about the ranch, about the mountains, about what it would be like to live there. I believe she's ready for an extended visit, perhaps the spring, when travel is easier. We can discuss the details when you come at Christmas." Christmas was 2 weeks away. They'd leave in a few days, brave the train journey in winter, spend the holiday in Kansas trying to convince a grandmother that her granddaughter would be safe, loved, and wanted in Colorado. "What if she says no?" Cora asked. "What if we get there and she's changed her mind? Then we keep trying, keep visiting, keep showing Emma that we're not going anywhere. And if Emma doesn't want to come?" Silas was quiet for a moment. "Then we respect that. She's been through enough. We don't add to it by forcing something she's not ready for." It was the right answer, but it didn't make Cora feel better. The next morning, a rider came up the road, moving fast despite the snow. Cora recognized the territorial marshal's deputy before he'd even dismounted. "Mrs. Vance," he said, tipping his hat. "Need to speak with you and your husband, official business." They gathered in the kitchen, the deputy warming his hands on coffee, while Cora and Silas waited. "Lawrence Greer's trial concluded yesterday," he said. "Guilty on all counts. Judge sentenced him to 15 years hard labor." Cora felt something release in her chest. 15 years. He'd be an old man when he got out, if he got out at all. "What about his property?" Silas asked. "Being auctioned next month. Territorial government selling it to pay restitution to his victims." The deputy pulled papers from his bag. "You're both listed as victims. You're entitled to compensation. But there's another option." "What option?" "The judge is allowing victims to purchase portions of the estate at reduced prices. Figured it was fairer than letting some rich speculator from Denver snap it all up. He spread the papers on the table. Greer's ranch is being divided into parcels. You could buy the section that borders your land. Another 500 acres, creek access, good grazing. Price is set at market value minus your restitution claim. You'd owe about $1,500? Cora looked at Silas. They had the money from her inheritance, enough to buy the land and still have plenty left for improvements and emergencies. What about the others? Silas asked. Marcus, the widow Chen, everyone else Greer hurt? They're getting the same offer. Most of them are taking it, turning Greer's empire into something that actually helps the people he tried to destroy. The deputy smiled slightly. Poetic justice, the judge called it. Silas looked at Cora. What do you think? She thought about the land, about what it would mean to own not just survival, but prosperity, about building something that would last, that Emma could inherit someday. I think we buy it, she said, and I think we help anyone who needs it to buy their piece too. They signed the papers that afternoon. By evening, word had spread through the valley, and people started showing up, some to celebrate, some to ask for help, some just to see if the rumors were true. Marcus arrived with his sons, grinning wider than Cora had ever seen. Bought back the land Greer stole from my daddy. Feels like writing the universe. The widow Chen came next, quieter, but no less satisfied. I'm too old to work 500 acres, but my nephew's coming from California. We'll work it together, make something good. One by one, they came. People who'd been beaten down, pushed out, told they didn't matter. Now they were landowners, stakeholders, builders of something new. Cora stood on the porch, watching neighbors become friends, watching a community form from the wreckage of one man's greed. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Silas asked, appearing beside her. The revolution you were planning back in Salvation. I never planned this. This is better than anything I could have planned. You started it, though, you and your stubborn refusal to be invisible. Cora leaned against him, let herself enjoy the moment. We started it. Don't put this all on me. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, they lay in bed and made actual plans for the future. Not survival plans, not crisis plans, real plans about crops and fences and whether to build a bigger house before Emma came. She'll need her own room, Cora said. A real one, with a window and space for books and whatever else 8-year-old girls need. You thinking about what Mrs. Patterson said? About the spring visit? I'm thinking we need to be ready. Need to show Emma this isn't just a place she's visiting. It's home if she wants it. Silas rolled over, propped himself up on one elbow. You really want this? A kid? All the chaos that comes with it? I really want this. Do you? I've wanted it since the day I gave her away. I just didn't think I'd get a second chance. Well, you did. We did. Let's not waste it. They left for Kansas 4 days later, the wagon loaded with gifts for Emma and supplies for the journey. The train was crowded with holiday travelers, everyone heading somewhere to be with family. Cora watched the country roll past and thought about family. Not the one she'd been born into, that was broken beyond repair, scattered to graves and hotel rooms and memories better forgotten, but the one she'd chosen. Silas, Emma, even the ragtag group of ranchers who'd become something like siblings in the fight against Greer. Family wasn't blood. It was choice. And she'd chosen well. They arrived in Milford on Christmas Eve, the town decorated with wreaths and candles and the kind of cheerful desperation that came with trying to pretend winter wasn't brutal. Emma met them at the door, bigger than Cora remembered, practically vibrating with excitement. You came! Grandmother said you might not because of the snow, but you came. Silas scooped her up, spun her around, and Cora saw the little girl she'd been in the photograph disappear, replaced by someone real and present, and theirs. Mrs. Patterson watched from the doorway, expression carefully neutral. Come in. You must be frozen. They spent Christmas with Emma and her grandmother, exchanging gifts, eating a dinner that was better than anything Cora had cooked in months, listening to Emma read from a book about horses that she'd gotten from the teacher at school. It was perfect in a way that made Cora's chest ache. This was what normal families did, what she'd never had growing up, what Silas had lost when his wife died. Later, after Emma was in bed and the adults sat by the fire, Mrs. Patterson finally spoke about what they'd all been avoiding. You want her to come live with you? Yes, Silas said. If she wants to. If you'll allow it. And if I say no, then we keep visiting, keep building trust, until either you change your mind or Emma's old enough to decide for herself. Mrs. Patterson stared into the fire. I raised my daughter in this house. Watched her grow up, get married, move to Colorado with a man I didn't trust. Then she died out there, and I got her daughter back broken and scared and not understanding why her mother was gone. I know, Silas said quietly, and I'm sorry for all of it. Sorry doesn't raise a child. Sorry doesn't feed her or teach her or keep her safe. She looked at him. But you've been consistent. 3 visits, letters every week, proof that you're stable and sober and actually trying. That counts for something. Is it enough? I don't know yet. She turned to Cora. What's your stake in this? You're not her mother. No, but I could be something, an aunt, a friend, whatever she needs. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm here, and I'll stay here. Mrs. Patterson studied her for a long moment. My daughter used to write about feeling invisible, about how hard it was being married to a man who was drowning in grief and couldn't see her anymore. You understand what that feels like? I do. Then you understand why I'm cautious, why I won't hand Emma over just because you've been good for a few months. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let her visit, let her see the ranch, see what life could be like, then let her choose. She's 8. 8-year-olds can't make those decisions. They can tell you what they want, whether they feel safe, loved, happy. That's enough. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long time. Then, 1 month, this spring, Emma comes to Colorado for 1 month. You show her the ranch, the life you're building. If she likes it, if she feels safe, we'll talk about making it permanent. If not, she comes back here and we revisit this when she's older. Those are my terms. Silas looked at Cora. She nodded. We accept, he said. They told Emma the next morning, watching her face light up with an excitement that was both wonderful and terrifying. I get to see the ranch for a whole month? If you want to, Cora said. I want to. I want to see the mountains and the cattle and your room and everything. She threw herself at both of them, hugging hard enough to hurt, and Cora felt tears she didn't expect burning behind her eyes. They left Kansas 2 days later with promises to write every week and return in April to collect Emma. The train ride back felt different, not nervous or uncertain, but full of anticipation. 1 month to convince an 8-year-old that we're worth staying for, Silas said. No pressure. We'll be fine. Kids are resilient, and she already likes us. Liking us for visits and wanting to live with us are different things. I know, but we're not the same people who gave her up, or the people who took her in out of obligation. We're choosing her, and she'll feel that. Winter deepened, and Cora threw herself into preparation. They added a room to the house, small but bright, with a window facing the mountains. Cora sewed curtains, built a bookshelf, found a rag doll at the general store that she thought Emma might like. Silas built a small corral for teaching her to ride, fixed up the gentlest horse they had, practiced what he'd say when Emma arrived. Marcus and the widow Chen came by regularly, bringing food and advice and stories about raising children that were equal parts helpful and terrifying. Just love her, the widow Chen said. Everything else you figure out as you go. By March, the house was ready. By April, Cora was a nervous wreck. What if she hates it? She asked the night before they were supposed to leave for Kansas. What if the ranch is too isolated or too different or too... Then we deal with it, Silas said. Together, like we deal with everything else. They picked Emma up on a bright April morning, the girl practically bouncing in her seat as the train carried them west. Tell me about the horses again, she demanded. And the mountains. And the barn you built. Cora told her everything, watching Emma's face, trying to read whether this was real excitement or just the novelty of travel. When they finally arrived at the ranch, Emma went silent. She stood in the yard, turning slowly, taking in the house and the barn and the mountains that rose behind everything like guardians. It's big, she said quietly. Too big? Silas asked. No, it's... She looked at them, eyes wide. It's perfect. The first week was chaos. Emma wanted to see everything, do everything, learn everything. Cora taught her to collect eggs from the chickens they'd gotten in winter. Silas taught her to ride the gentle mare, staying close while Emma gripped the saddle with white-knuckled determination. They made mistakes. Cora got frustrated when Emma refused to eat vegetables. Silas panicked when Emma fell off the horse. She was fine, just bruised, but he'd frozen, old fears rising up. But they kept trying, kept learning, kept showing Emma that this could work. By the second week, Emma had stopped asking when she was going back to Kansas and started asking if she could stay longer. By the third week, she was calling the ranch home without seeming to realize it. And by the fourth week, when Mrs. Patterson came to visit and see how things were going, Emma ran to greet her with stories that tumbled over each other in their eagerness. "We saw a bear. It was far away, and Papa said it wouldn't hurt us, but it was huge. And Cora taught me to make bread, and I burned the first batch, but the second one was good, and I have my own horse, her name is Daisy, and she's old, but she's sweet, and..." Mrs. Patterson listened to it all, watched Emma with eyes that missed nothing. Then she turned to Cora and Silas. "Can I speak with you privately?" They walked to the edge of the property while Emma stayed behind to show Marcus's sons the frog she'd caught in the creek. "She's happy," Mrs. Patterson said. Not a question. "We think so," Cora said carefully. "I know so. I've raised enough children to recognize it." She looked back at Emma, at the girl running and laughing and completely at ease. She was never this happy in Kansas. Safe, yes. Cared for, absolutely. But not happy. "What are you saying?" Silas asked. "I'm saying she belongs here, with you, both of you." Mrs. Patterson's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. "I'm saying I'll sign whatever papers need signing to make it legal. I'm saying she's yours, if you want her." Cora felt her throat close up. "We want her." "Then take care of her, love her, give her the life my daughter wanted for her." "We will, I promise." They told Emma that night, sitting on the porch while the sun set behind the mountains. "How would you feel about staying here?" Silas asked. "Not just visiting, living here. For good." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Would I still see grandmother?" "Whenever you want. We'll visit, and she'll visit here." "And I'd have my own room? Forever?" "Forever." Emma looked at the mountains, at the ranch, at the life spread out before her. "I'd like that." Just like that, they were a family. The paperwork took 3 months to finalize. Mrs. Patterson proved true to her word, signing custody over to Silas and Cora without hesitation or conditions. Emma transitioned from Kansas to Colorado with the resilience of children who'd learned early that life changed and you adapted or broke. She chose to adapt. By summer, she was reading to the cattle in a voice that carried across the valley. By fall, she was riding well enough to help move them between pastures. By winter, she was arguing with Silas about whether she was old enough for her own rifle and negotiating with Cora about bedtimes and chores. It was messy and imperfect and exactly what a family was supposed to be. The ranch grew too. With the land from Greer's estate, they expanded operations, hired help, built partnerships with other ranchers. The coalition Cora had dreamed about in Salvation became real. A network of small operators who supported each other, shared resources, and proved that you didn't need to be a land baron to thrive. Word spread. People started coming to the valley, not to take, but to build. Within 2 years, what had been empty land dotted with struggling ranches became a thriving community. They built a school. Emma was in the first class, along with Marcus's sons and the widow Chen's nephew and a dozen other children who'd appeared as families put down roots. They built a town hall, a general store, a church for those who wanted it, and a community center for those who didn't. And through it all, Cora and Silas worked side by side, raising Emma, running the ranch, building something that would last long after they were gone. One evening, 3 years after Emma had come to stay, Cora sat on the porch and watched the sun set over land that was truly, completely theirs. Silas joined her, Emma asleep inside after a long day of riding and exploring and being 11 years old. "You ever think about how we got here?" he asked. "All the time." "Was it worth it? The fighting, the fear, all of it?" Cora thought about the girl she'd been in Temper's Creek, scrubbing floors and being invisible. About the woman she'd been in Salvation, saving money for a revolution she didn't know how to start. About the person she'd become here, a rancher, a wife, a mother in all the ways that mattered. "Yeah," she said, "it was worth it." "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. They made this matter more." Silas took her hand, rough fingers familiar now, comfortable. "I never thanked you." "For what?" choosing me, choosing this. You could have walked away a dozen times, found something easier, something safer, but you stayed. There was never anywhere else to go. This is where I belonged. They sat in silence as the sky turned purple, then black, then filled with stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Can't sleep. Can I sit with you? Always, Cora said. Emma squeezed between them, small and warm and completely theirs. They wrapped her in a blanket, pointed out constellations, made up stories about the shapes they formed. You think grandmother will visit this summer? Emma asked. I'm sure she will. Good. I want to show her the new foal and my reading. I'm on chapter 7 of the book she sent. She'll be proud. Emma yawned, leaned against Silas. I'm glad I live here. I like Kansas, but this is home. Cora felt tears prick her eyes. We're glad you're here too. You're not going to leave, right? Either of you? Never, Silas said firmly. We're here. All of us. Together. Emma nodded, satisfied, and drifted back toward sleep. Cora looked at her husband, at their daughter, at the ranch spread out before them. This was what she'd been fighting for without knowing it. Not revenge, not justice, not even survival. Belonging. A place where she wasn't invisible, wasn't too much or too little, wasn't defined by what had been taken from her. A place where she could build and love and matter. They'd started with nothing but stubbornness and desperation. They'd fought land barons and storms and their own broken pieces. They'd made mistakes, suffered losses, questioned everything. But they'd won. Not the dramatic, decisive victory of stories. The slow, grinding victory of people who refused to quit, who kept working, kept trying, kept believing that they deserved better. And they'd built something worth protecting, worth passing on, worth living for. The story people told about Cora Vance would change over the years. Some said she was a hero who'd taken down Lawrence Greer single-handedly. Some said she was just lucky, in the right place at the right time. Some said she was too stubborn to know when to quit. All of it was true. None of it mattered. What mattered was the ranch that thrived under her and Silas's partnership. The community that grew because they'd shown it was possible. The daughter who grew up knowing she was chosen, wanted, loved. What mattered was the proof that you didn't have to be rich or powerful or born into the right family to claim a life worth living. You just had to be willing to fight for it. And if you were very lucky, you found someone to fight beside you, someone who saw you when the world looked through you, someone who chose you back. Cora had been that lucky. As Emma dozed between them and the stars wheeled overhead, Cora thought about the girl she'd been. The one who'd scrubbed floors and swallowed insults and believed she deserved nothing better. She wished she could go back and tell that girl what was coming. The pain, yes, but also the triumph. The fear, but also the love. The fights, but also the family. She wished she could tell her, you're going to be invisible for a long time, but one day you'll be impossible to ignore. You'll build something real from nothing. You'll love and be loved. You'll matter, and you'll finally come home. But that girl was gone, transformed into someone stronger, someone whole, and maybe that was the point. Maybe you couldn't skip the hard parts. Maybe they were what made the victory mean something. Silas stirred beside her. You're thinking loud again. Good thoughts this time. Yeah? Yeah. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm thinking we did all right, for two broken people who stumbled into each other by accident. We did better than all right. We built something that lasts. Emma mumbled in her sleep, something about horses and mountains, and they both smiled. This was enough. This was everything. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and earned, and theirs. The woman they'd called too much, and the man they'd called too broken hadn't just survived the frontier. They'd conquered it, claimed it, made it bloom, and in doing so, they'd proved what the world kept trying to deny. That the people who'd been discarded, overlooked, and broken could build empires from dust if you gave them half a chance and a reason to try. The stars shone above them, cold and distant and eternal. But here on Earth, on this porch, on this ranch carved from wilderness and determination, warmth bloomed. A family who'd chosen each other. A home they'd built together. A future worth fighting for. And somewhere in the darkness, Cora could almost hear it. The sound of every woman who'd ever been told she was too much or not enough, finally being seen. Finally being heard. Finally coming home.